Okay. Okay, here we go. Let's just give them a couple of minutes. People start just popping in. So as you probably know, they're not going to be. They're all not all going to be in the hour. Okay. Okay, we're here broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. We're broadcasting live here from Nearsoft's Mexico City office. And just give me a minute. Let me close this another window. Okay. It's just that I was listening to myself, so it's very uncomfortable. We're broadcasting live from Nearsoft's Mexico City office. This is DojoLIVE. And today we're going to have a very distinguished guest, Jay Samit. And Jay is a serial disruptor, author, innovator, business strategist, and he is the CEO of one of the world's leading multi-screen video services company called SeaChange International. Jay is a dynamic intrepreneur who is recognized as one of the world leading experts on disruption and innovation, which is going to lead me to the topic of today's broadcast, which is excuse me, which is hold on a second, please. Career success in an era of endless innovation. Jay, I'll pass on the mic to you. Welcome to our broadcast. And I'll let you do the talking now. Welcome to our
Carlos.
show.
And thanks everybody for spending a little time today. As Carlos said in my background, I've spent decades creating some of the largest tech companies and innovating. Things like eBay and LinkedIn that go from one person's idea to transforming the way we work and the way the world operates. We're now one click away from 6 billion consumers. We're now at an opportunity where you can be based in any country, in any city, and connect with consumers anywhere. So in an era of endless innovation, how does a company innovate? How do they thrive? How do they grow? And on an individual level, what does this mean to you in your career? The era of going to work for a company and that company going to be there for you to get your watch when you retire 40 years later, that era is gone. Of the original Fortune 500 companies, only 57 are still on the list. So change is about what's happening, and I wrote Disrupt You as a way to teach people how to think beyond the limitations they were taught. And I've been very lucky to have the book selling now around the world in multiple languages, and happy to talk with you and answer questions of, what should those that are at the height and the center of it, those that are actually coding the future, be doing and thinking about.
Okay, thank you, Jay. I'd like to, before we continue, I'd like to remind our audience that to please send us your questions. We have a Q&A section right there on your screen. You should be able to see it. Just click on the take part in the conversation option, and then you're going to be able to send us your question. In case you get kind of lost because you're new to Hangouts and just any of you with Nearsoft, just feel free to ping me on Skype, and I'll send me your questions. I'll read it back to Jay, and we will. He will respond, and then we'll discuss them here. Okay, Jay, I'd like to ask you a question. So you used the term endless innovation. So I don't think I would conceive the term innovation as being anything other than endless. I mean, in terms of that's how it's supposed to be, right? I mean, you cannot just stop and just be stalled for indefinitely, especially in the world of technology. So wouldn't this be kind of how can I say this? Not repetitive, but redundant. I mean, to say just endless innovation. Or
sure.
How does this apply to the technology world?
So let's define innovation and disruption. If you go
that'll be awesome. Thank you.
If you go back to the earliest days of man, of the Bronze Age, they figured out how to make a metal knife. And as they got better with metallurgy, knives became longer and they became swords, and swords became different shapes. All that's innovation. You're taking a prior invention and you're improving upon it. And this happens over centuries, over years, over whatever, until you get to that scene in Indiana Jones where Harrison Ford's standing in the street of Cairo. There's the big Arab swordsman and he's swinging that giant scimitar sword, and along comes Indy and he just pulls out his Smith & Wesson and shoots the guy. Okay, that's disruption. The idea to continue to innovate and continue to change and build and make a better sword, that stopped the day the gun came. Okay, so what's different about an era of endless innovation is innovations used to be good enough for you invented something new and you had time to reap the rewards of that. The pace of change is now ongoing. Making a better car will not help you compete in an era where no one is thinking about buying cars anymore. Okay? Apple and Google are getting into cars not to sell iron with wheels, but because they know they can control a certain amount of your day for advertising. The entire business model has changed. So when we look at something like Uber, many people see, well, this is a way of having software systematize the cab industry, when in fact, Uber has 1 million drivers. They report to a piece of software. So for the first time in history, we have workers who have no boss, have never met who they work for, and they're actually managed by a piece of software. That's the disruption. Does that answer your question?
Yes, actually, yes. And as I was listening to you, I was thinking, how do you combine that with you also talk about combining innovation with commercial success. Sometimes people or teams who innovate are more focused on the creative part, and then they kind of get stuck in the commercial side of the equation. So 100%. How would you overcome that?
So 100% right. So one of the big mistakes people make is they can release and unlock value with their disruption. So a great example was Napster. Once Napster came along and anybody could steal any piece of music, the music industry was fundamentally changed. It went from a $40 billion industry to a less than $20 billion industry virtually overnight. But the guys from Napster didn't figure out how to capture any of the value that they unlocked. So what I write about in Disrupt You and what you need to focus on is in every value chain from R&D through manufacturing, distribution, sales, in each product, there is a space that has a disproportionate amount of the value that can be captured and created. So if you can just focus on that piece of the business, that's where you'll have the most commercial success, as opposed to the traditional end-to-end.
Okay. Okay, let's just stop right there for a second and ask, does the audience have any questions? Feel free, now is the time. Meanwhile, what about disruption within an organization? How does that apply to organizations? Just like whether it's a small operation, 100, 150 people, or a large one like 10,000 people. So how does disruption apply to these organizations? How does it work?
So I was brought in to try to change and transform Sony, 160,000 people, and I was a global officer trying to disrupt. That's what an intrepreneur does, do it from the inside. And I've done it with very small failed startups that are in turnaround. So how do you go? And it really comes down to most people spend most of their time working in their business as opposed to on their business. So you really have to take a step back and figure out what is the purpose that you're trying to solve for. All that business is solving problems for others. The bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity, the more money that you make. So too many companies get lost in fighting the last war. So a great example was Kodak. Kodak invented the digital camera in 1975, but never released it. because it didn't have, and it competed with, the margins of film. So the executive making his bonus on film wanted to kill this thing, and so they put it in a corner thinking if they don't do it, they'll be fine. But ideas don't just stay in a corner. They don't stay in a company, and they don't stay in a business. So if you're in a company that you do not believe is growing and is trying to change the status quo, it probably won't survive. So you have nothing to lose by going to your team or your management and saying, here's what I think we need to be doing. Here's what's different. Here's how the market's changed. And either they agree with it or you move on. Because the idea that you can duck and cover and it's not my problem, the company will solve it. Well, we're seeing giant company after giant company completely lose their footing. Remember when Nokia had half the world's phones? What happened? They stopped innovating. They believed they knew what a phone was. You know?
Okay. Yeah. Nokia. Well, that brings a lot of memories, indeed. Okay. So here's the thing. Here's something that I was just thinking to myself. We're talking about all these challenges facing companies like we discussed, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, small companies, large companies. However, for some people, the term might be a little bit on the, how can I say this? Please bear with me. On the aggressive side, because sometimes a lot of people think that the concept of disruption has to do more with confusion, with disorder, instead of something that is really good, something that could be positive. So that could affect the spirits of the team members or the teams within a company. And how do you initially, how do you sell the idea of disruption to these teams to convince them, to talk to them into embracing disruption?
So what you invariably find, especially if you have a young new workforce, is they're living in a world that's different than the world that management grew up in. They see new changes, they see new capabilities, and you need to create an environment where they can percolate those up, and so that the team can decide what makes sense. Software used to be developed with, annual releases and a long, almost warlike plan, and that's now changed to agile, where you can stand up in a scrum and say, here's what we're going to accomplish over the next 2 weeks. We don't know where we'll be 6 months from now. We do not know where the market will be 12 months from now. Completely different way of creating software. Yet there were companies that resisted that change. Okay? There are companies that say, my competitor is X. So when I was at Sony, Sony looked around Tokyo and they saw their competition as Panasonic and Matsushita and Toshiba and Sanyo. They didn't see their competition as Apple or Microsoft or Google. And so they said, wow, we have Walkman in 14,000 stores. How is Apple ever going to get their iPod into a store? And Apple never did. Apple opened their own stores and went direct. So Steve Jobs innately was a natural disruptor. He was looking at, let me not play the game the way others are doing it. Let me redefine the rules. And you have that ability now because, as I said, we're all walking around with the ability to connect to almost anyone very efficiently. The cost of launching a new business, launching a new company, having a new strategic direction is much cheaper. We're all sharing the same cloud. We don't need rooms of iron or millions of dollars. And so some of the most basic ideas, people built all these map navigation systems into cars, and the guys from Waze were stuck in traffic one day and said, wait a second, the mobile company knows my phone is in my car, your phone is in your car. They can tell you to go right, me to go left. We can solve traffic. Completely change the idea of here's a piece of hardware dedicated to something. So as we move more virtual, as we use big data to see new insights, the pace of being able to disrupt any player in any business becomes very achievable. They lose their competitive advantage. Data is your only advantage in the 21st century.
So you're talking about data, but What about just like disruptive technology, for example, like there's an author, Christensen, I think, Clayton Christensen.
Yeah, but sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, in the Innovator's Dilemma.
Right.
He basically separates new technology into two categories, which is sustaining and disruptive, right? So, and when we're talking about incremental improvements to an already established technology, how does this stack up against refinement, for example, or performance? Because it is new, so there's a lot of challenges to overcome. How does that stack up against all these?
So you can always use data to make what you're doing better. You can see who's clicking, who's buying, what's working, what's not. You can modify. Just-in-time manufacturing and 3D printing is making a world of customized products that are morphing. But let's take a step back from technology and look at disruption for the most basic of all businesses. You're going to open a restaurant, okay? It's the #1 business that people open, the #1 business that fails. How does this disruption, how does, what I talked about in Disrupt You apply in that situation? So there was a guy who said he wanted to open a restaurant, but he looked at it from a different thing. He deconstructed why do restaurants fail before he opened his doors. #1, too many things on the menu. So if you don't sell all the fish, there goes your profits. So he said, I'm only going to have 3 things on my menu. #2, your restaurants are busiest at certain times and empty at the rest. At your busiest times, if 2 people sit down at a table that could sit 4 people, you're actually losing money because you can't monetize those other 2 chairs. So rule #2, he's only going to sit full tables. People will actually be sitting with strangers, a new concept. #3 is, how can I come up with a concept that will embrace only 3 choices of menu when you're going to sit at? And so the result of that process of disruptive thinking was Benihana. We're going to have a teppanyaki table where you sit around and the Japanese chef is grilling. That's your form of entertainment. You all come and are seated until there's enough people. You wait at the bar, which increases revenues. And he replicated this around the globe. So he didn't go and say, I have a restaurant idea or I want this type of food. He solved for what was broken in the restaurant model. Uber didn't go and say, let's buy cars. Facebook is the largest media company and owns no media. Alibaba's the largest retailer, bigger than Amazon, and they own 0 inventory. Hotels.com puts more people in rooms. Airbnb puts more people in beds each night than any hotel chain, and they own no rooms. What did they do? They disrupted each one of those industries by focusing on the piece of the value chain that they could capture that had the most value, and they outsourced everything else.
So outsourcing is the key here. This is one of the key elements.
Not so much outsourcing, focusing on where you can make the most value. Where's the value created in a diamond? Is it owning a diamond mine and employing thousands of people and tons of equipment to dig out and surf through millions of pounds? Is the value of the diamond controlled at the place where they're cut and they're given, the facets? Or was it in the fact that you have a monopoly and you come up with the concept that the only way any woman will say yes to you is if you give her one? So diamonds are not scarce. De Beers made them scarce by having a global monopoly. And the second they were disrupted by another source, they labeled those blood diamonds to stop people from buying it. But if somebody in a lab today compresses, and they can, and makes synthetic diamonds today are only slightly more expensive than real diamonds. The second they're the same price or cheaper, De Beers loses their competitive advantage because they can't capture the value that they once did. So disruption happens to any type of business. If you really look, that most of us do a whole bunch of parts of business because we have to, not because they're profitable.
Okay, thank you, Jay, for your response. I have a question from from someone in the audience here, and actually he's one of my fellow co-workers here at the company. He says, Claudio asks, what is the best way to start a disruption in a company? Do you start with a culture, or do you focus on the internal tribes?
Great question. So people rally around big ideas. If you think of all the big ideas in history, in business, in innovation, in change, in social order, okay? When you think about the Arab Spring, it all starts around somebody having a big idea that attracts other people to want to work and build on it. So to change within a company, what is the big idea and what is the big goal? And I'll give a great example of one that's going on right now with friends of mine. Elon Musk talked about Hyperloop, a new way of basically mag levitation to make faster than high-speed trains and change long-distance transportation, so you can go thousands of kilometers in a matter of minutes and be faster than a plane and la-di-da. But he just put it out there and said, somebody else go do it. But it was a big enough idea that top engineers got together. Next thing you know, capital got together, and they're building the first Hyperloop right now. So it really starts with that idea. Is your company the biggest and best it can be? If it isn't, why isn't it? Who is doing it better? What are they doing that you're not doing? How can you achieve that growth? How can you better market your services? How can you better? So disruption can take place in R&D, it can take place in HR, it can take place in marketing. It really is a mindset. And that's what in Disrupt You, we really, the whole middle third of the book is talking about the different parts of a company and how to attack disruption.
Okay. Well, thank you. Claudio, I hope that that answers your question. I'm pretty sure it will. There's also another topic that I've been kind of wondering is about consumer wear. For example, how does, in the emergence of consumer wear, what is the implications of the disruption in the case, for example, of mobile application development, for example? So I'll give a good example. So right now we're doing Google Hangouts. And a few years ago, I led a company that had a new idea, which was, why don't we go up against Hangouts, up against FaceTime, up against Skype, and have multi-party chat on a phone? So you could have video communication. The technology is called Uvu. I'm sure many of the people listening have used it. Uvu went up against the 3 biggest tech companies in the world: Microsoft, Apple, and Google. And in 18 months, ended up having 100 million active users. So the way you go about it is you focus on what is the unmet need and who benefits most. So if you start your app development not of, should we do it in Ruby, should we do this or that, find your end users, figure out what problem they're having. In the travel industry, Expedia was out there and all the big guys, and along came Hipmunk. And by just changing the GUI, the UX, and made it visual, they grabbed a chunk of that market at a fraction of the cost of these giant Travelocity companies were doing. So there's always room for seismic improvement, and you have the advantage in software that you can have one opinion, Carlos, and I can have another, but you then put it out there, and very quickly, in a matter of seconds, you can A/B test the living daylights out of assumptions, and data doesn't lie. Data has no ego. Data is always right. And so I built up a startup that Fox acquired earlier this year for a couple $100 million, where we changed what the ad unit is and how ads are measured. And it became so effective that we had the highest CPM rates in advertising in the globe, and nobody could figure out how we did it. And all that we did was religiously look at the data and make incremental improvements until we hit a point of the curve that there were no more changes
to extract value.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Jay, again. And there's something also, looking at my notes here from pretty much everything related to disruption. And this is something that I would kind of personally be interested in. I know that some of the questions have been geared towards a little bit more towards the technology side, on the market side, but also when we're talking about sales, because I'm also involved in the business development area here at Nearsoft. What can you tell us about disruption in software sales? For example, models. In terms of creating urgency for software vendors, for example, to retool customer experience. I don't know. So that type of scenario. What can you tell us about that?
So let's hit on the key word that you discussed, models, okay? A few years ago, software was in a box and you bought it for $50 and you owned it, okay? Then somebody came up with a better model of, let's make it a subscription where you pay so much a month forever, right? The SaaS model, the Salesforce.com model. Yeah. And yet, developers such as a shop like yours have never taken that approach in your pricing. Why not go to somebody and say, we're not going to charge you anything. We're going to build all of this for you, but we get so much per chair forever. We get so much per royalty. And you build in a partnership, so now you're not a vendor negotiating each time. You're on the same side of the table. So my company invented video on demand. If you ever get a movie from your cable box, that's what SeaChange does. We do it in 70 countries, Liberty Global and Comcast and the biggest operators in the world. But we changed our model recently and said, wait a second, instead of charging millions and tens of millions of dollars to do that software development, we'll do it for free. We'll be your partner. And we'll continue to innovate to make your business better. And we get a small piece of each revenue stream. And I'll tell you, the first customer, and they launch later this month, is the BBC. The BBC said, wait a second. We don't need to go through cable boxes anymore. We can take Top Gear and Sherlock and Monty Python and all of our content and make it available around the world and let people get it on their phones or on their TVs or on their tablets. And you can power all that for us, SeaChange. And if we use advertising, you get a piece. If we sell content, you get a piece. If it's subscription, you get a piece. Let's figure out the new world of over-the-top together. And we've completely changed the software. I have 700 employees, most of whom code. We've changed the model because the model I've just described gives us long-term value that continues to grow in recurring revenue, where you're out there looking for a new customer every day.
Okay. Thank you again, Jay. That was a very clear response, to be honest. I'd like to stop for a second, just again to send out a quick reminder to our audience to send me your questions. If for some reason you cannot do it here on our channel, because it appears to be that some people have some difficulty finding the option to send out their questions, you can do it on Skype as well. So please.
While we're waiting for that, Carlos, if I can just say one thing. So,
yeah, absolutely, please.
So yes, I'm obviously talking about a book, and I wrote the book to try to help people. But there's a companion workbook that goes along with it to help people map out their personal goals. Everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change themselves. So it all starts with inner change. So I am, for people being so nice today and for Nearsoft spending the time, I will give anybody that asks me a copy of the companion 40-page workbook for free. That's my gift to anybody. You can either reach out to me on Twitter at Jay Samit, or you can tell people in the email, or go to my website, jaysamit.com. But that'll help you get more out of the book and more out of your personal transformation. Because that's what disruption really is. It's first about changing how you see your own limitations. And once you can solve for changing yourself, changing your company, your business, your relationship with your customers, that's easy. The hardest thing is taking your own limitations off. Getting over that fear of failure. So We show you the scientific ways to do it. It's not the mumbo jumbo hug a tree type stuff. It's real proven fact.
I've seen that, yes. Okay, yeah, that's a very, very generous offer, and I'm sure that someone here is going to take advantage of that offer and take you up on it. I have another question here on Skype. He's Francisco, one of the developers here at Nearsoft. Well, I think he's in Hermosillo, the other city, where we have the headquarters, actually. He says, do you recommend a platform to develop an idea, like mobile, web? So that's his question.
So Francisco, if you're asking me, is there a software development tool that I like more than another? Though I've been behind some of the biggest tech innovations, I haven't written a line of code in decades. So I'm not the guy to answer that question. I spend more of my time dealing with boards and public companies, and the Pope came to me to try to disrupt how the Catholic Church was doing what they're doing. I work at a different level, so I'm not the right guy to answer what tool works best for you. But great question.
Okay. Oh, I have another question, and this is precisely about the companion book. He says if we can get the companion book to the Nearsoft Kindle account. So I would assume that that's an easy answer, but let you.
So the actual book's available for Kindle. It's available in audio. It's available in a whole bunch of languages, but I have to Thai and Korean and Chinese. It's not in Spanish, which I don't understand why no Spanish publisher has picked it up yet. But give it time. I will email the companion book to anybody. It's in a PDF form. But the actual book itself, yeah, get it on your Kindle. Or if you really have a horrible commute and my voice doesn't annoy you because I sat in the studio, it's 9 hours of listening to me. You get it in audio, so I apologize.
I'm right, actually. I don't know the guys here to have the language, because one of the things, actually, that's one of the prerequisites to be part of Nearsoft is to be bilingual. So the language. So I'm sure no one's going to complain. So by all means, okay. So could you elaborate a little bit more about what Disrupt You is about? I mean, it's a whole book. So if I ask you, talk to us about the book.
Okay.
So
where the book grew out of is, I worked and created some multi-billion-dollar businesses. I've transformed different industries, and I started teaching at the largest engineering school in the United States to teach people how to build high-tech startups. And two of my students last year, I got them the Series A funding, and they went out and did $150 million the first year. It's easy, it's proven, it happens all the time, but I couldn't scale what I was teaching without putting it to paper. So Disrupt You is in 3 parts. The first part, as I said, is about your personal transformation. If you see yourself as, I can't do this, guess what? If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So the first thing is to get that I can't attitude gone, and a different way of looking at yourself, your career, and what you're capable of achieving. And we break it down in a 4-step process. Then you take those same 4 steps, and the second third of the book is how to apply that to making money. So your business, your industry, your sector, we look at all kinds of industries and show that they all get disrupted following the same 4 steps. And then the last third is my favorite part of the book. There are those that are not money motivated, that are looking at a world filled with problems and saying, how can I deal with the big issues of mankind? Education, water, population, global warming. And guess what? It follows the same process, and you can solve that. So about 15 years ago, I got a call from the President of the United States. I had been talking about, when I had my small software company, that I wanted to get the internet into every classroom in the United States, that it could be equal access to knowledge, that for every kid that would watch a cat playing the piano, there'd be another one that would come up with the cure for cancer. So I get a call from President Clinton. I didn't know who he was. I mean, he didn't. I'm like, how does he know who I am? I'm a little guy with a 20-person software company. And he invited me to the White House to make a short version of the story. He said, go do it. With one catch, not $1 taxpayer money. Within 2 years, we had wired every classroom in the United States in an all-volunteer effort. We were able to fundamentally disrupt education, provide equal knowledge, and bring on the PC revolution into people's homes. So the power of a big idea and how to implement it. So that's the last third of the book. And you'll find tremendous inspiration. It's not, here's what Jay did. Jay is an average guy who hung out with a lot of other average people that changed the world. But some of the stories of what people are able to do, I'll give you one last one that just absolutely moved me when I was doing the book. A 14-year-old girl, nobody in her family is in the sciences, learned how to make a neural network in her programming class. She made a simple football game. She comes home and her mom is crying, and she asks her mama, why are you crying? And her mom says, because her sister, the aunt, has breast cancer. This 14-year-old girl is very sad. She loves her aunt. Most of us would say, well, there's nothing I can do. She said, what if I take this neural network that I learned about? What if I build this for breast cancer detection? She's 14. By the time she's 15, she's come up with a process that is 99.59 accurate, more accurate than mammograms or anything used worldwide. And she's now responsible for saving 40,000 lives a year. If a 14-year-old can do that, what did you and I achieve this year? It's very humbling. So,
yeah, I think it is.
And it's very inspiring. And you see how easy it is once you start believing that you can make a difference, that you can change. And that's why I'm out spending the time doing this. That's why I'm going to be in Mexico City speaking. Oracle's got like 7,000 people that they want me to speak to on November 19th. So maybe I'll get to meet you face to face.
Oh, please, we'll be honored. We
can have a cerveza together. But I'm on a mission because if I can just do 1 second of why I'm doing this, if that's okay. This isn't about making money from a book. There's no money made from making books. What this is when I look at the world events right now, when I look at the horror in the Middle East and ISIS, when I look at Spain's economy, Greece's economy, when I look in our own country, what's happening in Ferguson and Baltimore, this isn't race, religion, or culture. This is massive unemployment for those under 30. So Mexico hasn't been hit with this yet because there's enough manufacturing. But when that manufacturing starts disappearing as more and more products become virtual, nobody's making an alarm clock, it's an app. Nobody's making a lot of things, it's an app. What do we do with all these people? We have 2.3 billion millennials. There will not be company jobs for them. So unless people learn how to start their own businesses and solve their own problems, we as a society end up with a very unstable world. That's why I'm doing this.
You know, you just said something that is very key, I think, from my standpoint. That you said right now, that's why I'm doing this. And as I was listening to you and I saw your information and your bio, and I was thinking, well, you have consulted, you know, the Pope, and then you're talking to a group of average Joes, well, so to speak, right? We're not average Joes, but you know, well, you get the idea. So we're kind of more on the humble side, or more on the low-profile side. So you said, this is why I'm doing this. That's very. I mean, from my standpoint, perhaps there might be someone here who might agree with me. It's very uplifting, because to some extent, and I'm quoting we want to change the world. We believe that we can change the world no matter how small the efforts are, if they're well steered. Okay, so, and again, let me go back to you. And you have consulted with very high-profile personalities, political-wise, and then I would like to ask you, I mean, just to clarify and to let everyone know, especially in your Softians, why did you decide? And I think that will be the question. Why did you decide to take on this engagement?
Well, it's really simple. How could I have the arrogance to know who's going to change the world? We all have the power to. You know, for me, the purpose of life is to find a life of purpose. We're not going to be here forever, but our ideas and what we accomplish can. We can make a difference. We can make a difference in our family. We can make a difference in our town. We can make a difference in our world. The limitation is what you choose. The government of Botswana down in South Africa asked me, would I mentor 30 students? They have a goal. They want to make 30 millionaires by the year 2030. They want to show a culture of change. How honored and humbled am I to have that possibility, that responsibility, that impact. Medvedev, the head of the Soviet, Russia, had me speak. They are trying to create startups and a startup culture there, and they don't have it. We can make whatever impact we want in the world. So, Carlos, I look at you, and what would you like to achieve? How can I help? And so, if today, in some small part, if people spending time with the knowledge I put on paper get you one step closer in your journey to having a successful, happy life, then I'm blessed to have that opportunity.
And I'm thankful for your words, because we're kind of pretty much in the same wavelength. Again, a little pause. People, people in the audience, again, we're a few minutes away from, unfortunately, bringing this session to an end. So please, if you have any questions for Jay, please, now is time. And I think that at least in my head, a lot of questions and ideas are right now. Okay, but while we're
waiting for a question, let me give one question to everybody that's listening.
There you go.
This is a hard personal question. Are you living life or just paying bills until you die?
Oh, I saw that. I saw that on an update the other day, and it kind of struck me. So there you have it, guys. Are you living the life that you want, or are you just paying bills until you die? So, you know, Jay, that what you just said, I saw it the other day on a LinkedIn update, and it struck me. That's one of the things that is it mentioned in the book as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So that's hard. In the case for answer, well, ask Jay another question. This is going to be my final one. Takes me back to the beginning of our conversation. The word disruption is being more widely used, more frequently used in a number of scenarios. And I think that at some point, some people or some groups or some teams might have even overused the term in non-applicable situations. Either concept of disruption, I think sometimes misunderstood by simple cleverness, right? So how would you differentiate disruption against cleverness? Because if we focus on cleverness, there's some cleverness. I mean, everyone's clever. Everyone's disruptive. Everyone has a whole bunch of ideas. Disruption. Which ones are really disruptive, and which one is just clever? How do you differentiate one from the other?
Disruption means that the world, once it discovers the disruption, fundamentally changes and cannot go back to the old way. Okay? Are you wearing a beeper on your hip? No. A cell phone has fundamentally changed. Okay? Are you driving a horse and buggy? No. Okay? You know, Is anybody, you know, running around with a spear ever since the gun came along? No. So we're now looking at so many things that are changing. So the biggest changes: autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, big data, new renewable energy sources, really change everything that we're talking about. The world won't go back. The idea that we are a couple years away from solar paint, so that building you're sitting in gets painted, you attach two electrodes, and it captures 15–20% efficiency. We will no longer need fossil fuels. What does that do to countries whose entire economy is based on fossil fuels? So we now have a startup that just raised $100 million that makes vegetarian meat. It is actual meat, but it didn't come from an animal, okay? What does that do to how we use our land, how we use our buildings? So there are huge changes. Now, not all disruption has always been positive, okay? But it is something that once it happens, it doesn't go back. And so right now, companies that are still doing something the same way, banks loan money based on deposits, that's gone in a world of crowdfunding and seamless currency, a Bitcoin that no nation can control the flow of. That totally changes how we tax, how we bank. You know, what is the purpose of an office building if people can do the same work on their computer at home? Why are they suffering Mexico City traffic to get in there? So distance learning, lifelong learning. We will not have one job and one career, you know, and get that gold watch. And I think it's the most exciting time to be alive. I think it's the one that's filled with the most possibilities. The idea, and I'm so humbled when I hear from readers all over the world, the idea that people in over 100 countries have reached out, that Disrupt You has inspired them or helped their business or done whatever. I could never visit or get to meet all those people. It's an amazing time. So we can take the limits off and say, with the time we have on this planet, let's figure out how to make the greatest difference we can.
And if possible, I would add, just have fun while doing it, or try to, right?
I've had the most fun. I think it was Wired that said, you know, I have the coolest job in the industry. Yeah, I've never worked a day in my life. I play. I get to create new things. I mean, I put the first video on a computer. The idea now that decades later, you and I are talking in real time, and you know, Uvu, we are able to do this with tons of people. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So I thank everybody for their time today. I'm sure you'll let people know how to either reach my website or follow me on Twitter. There's about 100,000 executives that get daily inspiration. Just like a shower, we all need a little motivation every day. So I try to give that dose.
Absolutely. Jay, just one more thing. I have one more final question before we close. And this is from another one of my friends and coworkers here, Cuauhtemoc. He says, it seems we need to start with the big idea to start being disruptive and work around it. Should we just sit and wait for the idea to arrive? Can we try to accelerate this process?
Yo, you just hit on my favorite part. I will guarantee every listener a $1 billion idea if they'll do the following exercise. Okay?
All right.
Carlos, do you have any problems in your life?
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of, I do. I mean,
congratulations.
Problems that are good to have.
Everybody has problems. The way to $1 billion idea is to do this. Today, write down 3 problems that you notice in your life. I was in traffic this morning. I hate traffic, okay? You know, whatever the 3 problems are. As you go through, you have to do this exercise for a month. As you go through 30 days, it gets harder and harder to notice what is a problem and what is something that I accept. And I'll give a great example that came out of this process from somebody else. The problem could be, ooh, did I just take my medicine? I don't remember. Carlos called. Did I take it before the call? Did I not? That's a problem. He went and took a digital watch those little 6-cent watch that you get in a fast food, a McDonald's Happy Meal, put on the lid of a pill bottle. So every time you close the bottle, it starts the countdown. You look at your bottle and goes, wow, it's been 4 hours. I guess I didn't take my pill. Oh, it's been 4 minutes. Oh, I took my pill. He's now a multimillionaire off of that very simple problem. So for 30 days, write down 3 problems. At the end of the month, you have 90 ideas. Look at which one impacts the greatest number of people that you are passionate about solving, and you now have better deal flow than any Silicon Valley venture capitalist. Okay? But it takes discipline, because the first day it's real easy to come up with a couple things. Waze was solving the traffic problem. You don't have to be an engineer to figure out how to solve traffic. You have to focus on what's another way of looking at it. So if you'll do that, this is the way to come up with that big idea. And then we talk about in the book what I call, you then want to kill the big idea. You don't want to nurture it. You want to destroy it. You want to find everything wrong with the big idea so that you make it bulletproof before you start spending money. And then you end up with what I call a zombie idea, the idea that can't be killed. And that's when you start throwing money at it. And that's why when you look at the dozens and dozens of startups that I've taken stakes in, they all made money. It wasn't the batting average of a VC where 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100. It's a very disciplined process, because you start with the big problem. The big problem is your customer base. You then know you have a built-in audience waiting for your solution. And if you start looking at opportunity as really just obstacles, every problem is an opportunity in disguise. So if somebody listening has a really horrible life, congratulations. You have the best chance of being successful.
Oh, there you have it. Have homework, and I guess that at least we can all think of at least one problem every day. So I mean, that's easy. That's the easy part. So the difficult part is all right. Jay, we're about to close our Dojo Live for today. So I don't know if you have. Is there anything else you would like to tell our audience before we go?
Just continue having success in your journey, and thanks for spending the time.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that I already shared all your information with the audience and all our channels. Jay, I really appreciate your having taken the time to talk to us today, and you will because we're going to be sending you by postal mail a token of our appreciation for your time, and that's pretty much it. Again, thank you, and let's be in touch. Keep up the good work, and we'll get to read your book.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.